very difficult because these are all conceptual, the whole issue of equality, the whole role of the state, etc. What we shall now do from this class onwards to the next few classes, where we will now look at substantive portions of the Constitution and how it affects us in our daily lives. So we will be starting with Article 19.1, which is the fundamental rights, the fundamental freedoms chapter. We hope all of you have your books with you as we're going through it. And we shall then go on to have a small exercise, after which we shall get into the more meatier portions of the discussion. Okay, so we hope that you all have your Constitution books with you, so that when we read, at least you will have it to sort of refer to. Okay, we shall first show you a cartoon which you can look at, and maybe some of you could share about what strikes you when you see that cartoon. Can we have the cartoon now?
See my screen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Open it up to the Kudam. What do you see in this cartoon? What strikes you? What are your thoughts? Who do you recognize? Anybody can go.
Does it talk about crony capitalism, the government and all, the state and all its pillars trying to shield the capitalist? Is that
Okay.
what implies?
No, whatever strikes you.
So many departments are protecting him uh, from the trial he has to face, or from the FIR that is filed against him, or whatever concerns people are expressing. It is not going up to the court at all. It is stopped at the police level, or at the every team of the government department is protecting him.
Okay. Good. That's interesting. What else?
Janvi raised neoliberalism and how it protects big money.
Okay. That's much of the head talking. You're right, Janvi. Absolutely right. Breeze says she can't see it.
So
And
for
Mike,
Breeze and Mike, maybe you open it from your phone. Then if you could just swipe left or right from the screen you're currently on, you should be able to see the screen and the picture.
okay. Subhashri and Uday also have the same problem. Yeah.
I'll share the same cartoon on the group in the meantime.
Yeah. Please do that. Okay. Anybody else? It's a cartoon.
In addition to the government, the media is also protecting
Yeah.
the person in the middle.
Okay. Wonderful. Arvind has joined. Welcome, Arvind. Well, what else?
Nanda, you're saying something? You're very faint.
Yeah.
We can hear you, but barely. Very faint. Could you speak closer into the mic?
Yeah. Now?
Go ahead. I can speak out. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. The judiciary wanted to count me. It says like, don't leave me alone. Judiciary wants, it's a louder voice from the court say, count me in.
Yeah. Okay. Some more?
So what is written here is ek hai, safe hai. So something like, unity is strength, on a lighter note. So, if we are united, I mean, we don't need a court, something like that may be interpreted. Or, we can stay out of trouble if we are united.
Okay. Advika, what do you say? What do you see in this?
It's like when you are united, it's safer.
Yeah, come again, Advika. Couldn't hear you too well.
When they are unitedly protecting him,
Okay. Yes.
it's like it's maybe unity and strength, something like that.
Unity in strength in protecting Adani. How does it make you all feel? When you see
Not
this
so
cartoon,
good.
It was like all these years, it was evident that media, the party, the police, all this EDI, IT, all these were working for the government in power and they were protecting him. Now the court also wants to come and join these forces,
to
which we were assuming that our judiciary is free and it's not it doesn't join hands in protecting criminals or the see, but here it shows that it's also in run up to join these forces to protect him.
So now is this objectionable? Here they are maligning one individual.
Yes, of
They are
course.
criticizing you can see that there is our Prime Minister and Home Minister. They are branding all our very prestigious institutions like CBI and ED and criticizing SEBI, and they are insulting courts. So will it amount to contempt? What do you all think?
what do you all think when you see this? What did you all feel when you see it? Neo-capitalism, all that is fine. I mean, that's
Very
larger.
disappointing.
Okay, you feel
Disappointing
disappointed.
state of affairs.
Okay, disappointing state of affairs. That's okay. What about the others? Praveen, Shivaram, Sendil, Divya.
Also was written, एक है, safe है.
हाँ, एक है, safe है. We are all together and then we are safe. We are safe and we are together. But when you see this cartoon, what does it make you all feel? If you
It's
look at
like
the SEBI, yeah,
it's like the illustrator is holding a mirror to us because this is what we have been constantly seeing as of now.
yeah. Lovely, Divya. And therefore what?
So therefore, it enrages us to be living in such state. Also, like to put it mildly, disappointing.
Okay, very nice, very nice.
Helpless, actually, if everyone in power, executive, judiciary, everyone is in cahoots, then what can I as a common man do? This makes me feel helpless.
Yeah, it feels helpless. But Divya also was saying you feel a certain rage when you see this, saying that we need to do something about it.
But apart from all this intellectualization, when you see a cartoon of like this, does it bring a smile?
Yeah, it is quite sarcastic and it's nice.
So
Yeah.
do we laugh about it?
We shouldn't. We should think about it.
No doubt.
I think
Correct.
when it comes to laughing, I mean, if I talk about the standpoint where I am, so as a PhD student, we have been so trained to sort of overanalyze things that it sort of becomes difficult to laugh at it, and we sort of subscribe to emotions that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. So what do you think is the purpose of cartoons?
I think it's meant to share I mean, this particular cartoon, I guess the thought behind it must have been to share the reality in a very sarcastic manner and grab attention. I mean, if this was written in a report, an intellectual report, I think it would not garner that much attention than this particular illustration, maybe.
We cannot get into violence because that is what they are doing to us. So the least thing we can do about is to attack them in a way, in an intelligent way, where other people also are able to understand that and share it and use that as a weapon.
Okay, lovely, lovely. Any last one?
There are a few chats that I can read out.
Please read
So Nandini is sharing, feeling the discomfort that we are all alienated when the government comes together to protect him from us. Where is actually us who are getting exploited by him? Tilo says, call for us to wake up. I think there's one more comment. Yeah, Shakti writes, where is the place for us the people in the governance. No, I don't feel like laughing, conveying a heavy, hard truth in a lighter way.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Abhishek. You have your hand up.
So, from these discussions, something keeping in mind we are going to talk about free speech. I somewhere feel people able to produce such articles or such cartoons and publish them in a way is reinforcing that, free speech is still there in the country, or, is it something like that? So people able to, so this is some criticism of the government, or, some kind of criticism or reflection of the society. So people are able to share such cartoons. It reveals that there is some form of free speech still in the country or something like that.
Okay, Abhishek. So you feel good that we are still able to produce cartoons like this?
So
As-
like a plus
as-
side.
Okay, as contrasted to, let me use a hard word, a tin pot dictatorship.
To
What do
add to that, sorry, though, it was just, I think today or yesterday, Manjul, who is another cartoonist, was called out by the police because apparently his cartoons violate law. Just to add to this, since he said that
Yeah.
it also indicates free speech. The other thing is also true that people are clamping down on even cartoons.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point to start out with. So cartoons are not meant to make or please people in power. Cartoons are to prod people like us or the viewer to rethink, to critically think, to analyze, to, some of you had said, no, to think of what do you do differently. That's the purpose of a cartoon. The purpose of a cartoon is not to say hanji, hanji. The purpose of a cartoon is to provoke thinking. Okay, which is what this cartoon is doing. And I asked a little earlier, what is the difference between India and a tin pot dictatorship? And one of the answers is we feel good that at least you have the space to do it now. But like one of you just said now, just yesterday, news has come out that the government wants to ban this particular cartoon because it, for various reasons, because it offends the powers that be. It is in bad taste. It is bringing down the reputation of the government, etc., etc. What do you all think about it? The Enforcement Directorate has written to Twitter. Twitter has then written back to these people saying that we have a notice from them saying that you have to pull your cartoon down. What do you all think about it?
Oh, actually, I was not aware of this development. I was still thinking. So then I feel, yeah, it is a sorry state, and things are not.
So what do we do after feeling a sorry state? What do we do? Sorry state is very nice to talk about. Yeah. Okay. So that's the starting point for our discussion today. Okay. That the freedom of speech and expression cannot be looked at in isolation. It's not some abstract thing somewhere else. It's very much in the here and now. It's very much part of our day-to-day work. Now, see, we have been seeing these cartoons every day. Manjul and many of these people in both in the English press and the vernacular press, some wonderful cartoons are coming. And the purpose of the cartoons is to provoke thinking, is to tickle people to think differently from what they're doing. And like one of you was saying, we are so used to thinking in a particular way. One of you said, I'm a PhD scholar. I'm conditioned to think in a particular way. So much so that if there's a thought which comes to say, to stir you up, we don't get stirred up very fast. Okay. But that's the purpose of the cartoon. And that's part of free speech. So when do you allow free speech? When can you say that there is free speech? When are there conditions to free speech? Okay. What is the fundamental right to free speech guaranteed to us? In what circumstances do we use it? How do we expand it? How should it be limited? Are the questions we are going to be looking at today. Arvind, would you like to add something before we get into the next space?
Not just maybe just to add to what you said, Suresh. I think the quality and Silas' comment, humor is sometimes underestimated, right? And the fact that the state is taking it so seriously means it's very important. And sometimes you need to be serious about the frivolous, which is there's very serious implications of frivolity. It's not something which is meaningless, you know. And to poke fun at self-important people and to poke fun at the state might be one way, really, you know, of taking forward a certain larger politics itself. And I'll tell you one moment, at least in the PUCL, which Suresh, of course, remembers, is when the state imprisoned Munawar Farooqui, a cartoonist, and the PUCL at that time came out with a statement where we invoked Gandhi's sense of humor and said that a state which loses a sense of humor, state must develop a sense of humor was the point we made. I don't remember the exact words, but the point being that humor is very important. You know? And we should, again, Suresh's provocation was this. We felt bad, etc. That's one point, right? Or we feel sad is one point. But the point really is this. How can we develop humor as one of what we use in taking our politics forward? Again, freedom of speech and expression is not an empty notion. It has links to the politics of transformation, the politics of change. And we think, at least the point of putting the cartoon there, is it's a very sharp, very provocative, and very fun way of conveying a very serious point. And so it's a very, very important study. Thanks.
There's a few comments. I'll just read them out very quickly. Praveen writes, wonderful criticism of the current scene of the system. If it's banned, it will be a violation of Article 19. Advika writes, it's like a certain opinion is enforced on people, and by asking it to be taken down, they will prevent other views from being expressed. Breeze makes a very poignant point. The cartoon bitterly represents Manipur a lot, and the man right in the middle is Biren Singh, and the central government, and its allies from different sections are protecting Biren. And Subhashri/Uday writes, if instead of naming a particular party, it named a person, wouldn't that potentially be defamation?
So we shall look into all of these things now within the time frame that is given to us. Before we get into the substantive portion, we thought it might be very useful to just look at the section, to look at the article. We will just have a look at the article 19.1. Okay, and then the condition, the limitations called 19.2, Article 19.2. And then we will get into a small case study discussion where you all can sit in small groups to discuss about what you understand by it. Now, when we think of cartoons, things of fun, things of being sarcastic will come. What about books? What about films? What about pictures? Where does the right to free speech exist? Where does it not exist? When can it be used, etc.? These are very difficult and different issues, but we need to have a clear understanding of that. So can somebody read this Article 19.1?
And Subhashri's query about whether in naming an individual will amount to defamation or not is going to be part of the exploration. We will be addressing all these issues.
Can somebody read it, please?
Fundamental
Yes, go ahead, Praveen.
freedoms.
Yes, Praveen. Praveen, go ahead.
Yeah, fundamental freedoms, Article 19.1. All citizens shall have the right. Article Section A. To freedom of speech and expression. To assemble peaceably and with arms. C.
It should be without
to
arms.
form associations, unions, or cooperative society. D. To move freely.
It should be without
Hello.
arms.
It should be
To
without
move
arms.
freely through the and
Yeah, that's a typo. I'll just fix it in the meantime.
it's
Go ahead.
Without arm, yeah. It should be without arm. To form association or unions or cooperative societies. D. To move freely throughout the territory of India, and E is omitted. F. To practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business, subject to renewable exemption outlined in Article 19.2 to 6.
Okay. So we shall now today look at the first freedom of speech and expression. Let's just look at 19.2, which is the limitation to freedom of speech and expression. The next slide. Yeah, can somebody else read it, please?
Nothing in subclause A of clause 1 shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law insofar as such law imposes reasonable restrictions on the exercise of the right conferred by the said subclause in the interest of the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation or incitement to any offense.
Okay, so the freedom of speech and expression in India is not unlimited. The freedom is subject to these limitations. Okay, and what are the limitations? In the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation or incitement to an offense. In these situations, you can think of limitations. Outside of these situations, the state or the government cannot impose limitations on the citizens' freedom of speech and expression. Okay. Now, just wanted you to have this broad idea. We hope you have read it earlier, but anyway, this is part of the subject that we are going to be discussing today. Any questions so far on Article 19.1 and 19.2? So 19.3 will be 19.1. It's a limitation of 19.1b and so on. Okay. Any questions so far before we'll break into small rooms, breakout? Yes, Satya.
In the previous slide, there is something omitted.
Yeah.
Can we know why? What?
Yeah.
Move freely throughout the territory of India has been omitted is what?
There was a fundamental freedom. These are all fundamental freedoms, and that was the freedom to hold property.
Okay.
So the fundamental right to hold property was originally a fundamental right which could not be amended. Then the problem came about when you had to nationalize a lot of institutions, and you had to, for example, to take excess land which landlords had, zamindars had, so that they can be distributed to people. Okay, so as part of the land reform, so that was omitted later on. It was brought back into the constitution as Article 300, 300A. So now it's a constitutional right, but not a fundamental right. Please keep a note on this: fundamental right, constitutional right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one question Shubhashri asked: do citizens/persons have the right to bear arms?
No, we don't have the right in India. You have a right to bear arms with proper license, but it's not a generic right. Yeah. Can we go into the case study here, and then let's read the case study together, break out into smaller rooms, come back again after 15-20 minutes. Each group. Yeah. Yeah. Can somebody read?
I'll read.
Yeah. One paragraph, one person. Go ahead, Tilo.
M is a well-known and highly regarded academic, researcher, and writer of non-fiction and fiction works. He writes a fictional novel set in a local town in the 1940 to 1950s about a man and woman deeply in love with each other who are from an agricultural background, very rustic and simple. They remain childless for many years. The wife is subjected to severe teasing by other community women as a barren woman. She is afraid that her husband's family might ask him to desert her and marry another woman. But the husband reassures her that he will not do so. Her mother and mother-in-law pressure her to participate in a ritual in a nearby temple. The last day of the 14 days festival falls on a moonless night. There is a carnival type of atmosphere with many games and exhibitions in the town. Sorry, I read the second para also. People from the entire region gather. Late in the night, the normal rules of sexual conduct are relaxed, and any woman can have physical relations with any man. And any child conceived that night is considered a child of God. Unknown to the husband, the wife is taken by her mother and mother-in-law that night, and she conceives. The rest of the novel is about what happens after the husband got to know what happened that night. In the novel, the name...
Tilo, can we have some other? So just so that we have different... Scroll down. Yeah. Somebody else read, please, so that we don't waste too much time.
I can go.
Yeah. In the novel.
Okay.
Go
In
ahead.
the novel, the name and place of the temple is provided, though not specifically mentioned. The community to which the couple belongs can be easily inferred, which is the dominant caste in the region.
Yeah. Go ahead, Breeze. Read this paragraph also.
Mm. The novel receives wide acclaim, but a major controversy breaks out with the dominant community caste attacking the author as deliberately defaming the community by talking about the practice on the 14th day as though the community believed in sexual promiscuity and promoted orgies. They allege that such a social practice did not exist. Women's groups were mobilized against the author and book. A huge furor breaks out. The author explains that the novel is fictional, but the practice he has used to construct the novel is based on his historical research, which he is willing to share.
He explains he belongs to the same community and had no intention of hurting anyone's sentiments. He announces that he will change the names of places and characters so caste can't be identified. Despite this, processions, hartals, strikes, and bunds are organized, demanding arrest of the author and banning of the book.
Finish it, Sandip.
The police and revenue authorities tell the author the protests are creating law and order problem. They say they cannot give him protection as local people are against the novel. They also ask him to withdraw the book and destroy all copies as in the name of free speech he has crossed all limits. His explanation that research documentation showed that such a practice existed in several other areas also earlier was rejected, saying it may have existed earlier, but he should not write about it now. The government also informally asks him to apologize to the women in general and announce burning of all the stocks of books. The author asks for protection. There is no response. He is approaching the BHTC class on what to do next. What will your advice be?
Okay, so author M, just to sort of summarize, author M is a very well-known author, writer. He writes a book which is based on his research in a local temple where on the 14th day of a festival which falls on a moonless night, Amavasya, rules of sexual conduct are changed only for that night. And any child which is gotten at that time is seen to be a child of God. Okay, and this couple's, the wife is taken by the mother and mother-in-law because she's not been able to bear a child and taken to this festival. She becomes pregnant and the rest of the story, that's a story, that's a novel. Now the local dominant community accuses the author of defaming the community, bringing down its prestige and its status, and abusing the women and saying that the women are very promiscuous, etc., and that this is very damaging to the community. He says, it's my right to speak. It's a research I have made and I've written. I also belong to the same community and the intention was not to hurt anybody's sentiment. Nobody accepts it. A big, huge protest is drawn. The police say that we cannot protect you. The police say that you do and you withdraw the thing and also destroy all the books. He's approaching this class, all of you. Okay. He's saying, he's approaching and obviously says what to do. What should we all tell? So we thought we'll start out with a discussion on this. Sayantan will take you on about the breakout rooms. We have about 28 people. We can have 3 groups of 9 people each. Arvind can be in one, Saila can be in one, and I can be in one, or Sayantan can be in one. So we can break out into 3 groups. Have you understood the context and the case study? This is a real life story. Huh? This is not some make-believe story. Any questions
Any
about it?
doubts from anybody? Yeah.
Sayantan, if you can send it to all in the WhatsApp group so they can
I'll
have
do it. I'm just doing it. In the meantime, any questions about what it's supposed to do in the breakout rooms?
We are studying right to free speech. So in terms of free speech, what do we do? Subhashri has already raised this issue. What about defamation? Some of the others had raised some other issues. So why did you just discuss it? Don't be bothered about whether you are right or wrong. See, I was talking to a few people in the last week, and there were some of them saying, we feel the questions we ask is very silly. Other people might think that we don't know. I'm saying the Kudam is a place for you to be silly. So don't worry. The Kudam is a place where you can ask any question, and nobody's going to judge you as to how good you are or how not good you are. So please feel free to talk. Maybe you should just get into the rooms and jump into the tank and discuss. Yeah. You come back after about, say, 15 minutes, have a discussion amongst yourself. I hope everybody gets down to speaking whatever you have understood of it. And one of you can summarize, say 15 to 20 minutes. Sayantan, can you create the breakout rooms? And
Yeah, so I'm just assigning 3 breakout rooms. It will be assigned automatically. So you just have to press join when you get the prompt. And I've just opened the breakout rooms now. You should be all able to join.
Sayantan, about, I think, Uday. Let him be in the room I'm in. Which room do I go? Which room does Arvind go? And you go on one.
So we can choose. You can pick any room.
Now put me in the room where Uday is.
I'll do that.
Arvind, is it okay with you?
It's fine with me. Shantan, if you can be in the room I'm supposed to be in, I might step in and out. Huh? That's the only thing.
Can Saila come from a different device then? Then 3 of us can be there.
Yeah, she can come. Just start it and then Saila will join.
Can you join room 1? That's where Subhashi and Uday are. I'll just try to assign you.
Oh, it's okay. Room 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Others, are you unable to join? Do you need any help? Abhita, are you unable to join your room?
Groups like to talk about what was discussed.
Why don't we, Sayantan, you can say group 1, group 2, group 3.
Yeah.
You can go in that order.
Go ahead,
I can
Sandeep.
go. I mean, like,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I think I'm from group 1. So, and we discussed, I mean, like, just to get started and, like, express my freedom of speech, like what I felt like listening to the conversation. Like Suresh mentioned, like, we are not still enough, we couldn't like come up with advice or like any particular advice, but as a kudam, what we agreed was like we will stand with the author and ask him to like proceed with the legal action or go to court. That was the advice that we decided on. But before that, before like going to the court or whatever it is, we would stand with him in the protection of his freedom of speech. And then some Uday and Shubhashri also mentioned he has that right to speak his own truth, be it whether a work of fiction or based on research or anything. And the session of community who got offended or took offense should also make their own case so that proper legal action can take place and like we could know what is going on there. And there's one more example that I found interesting is he could approach law in a different country. I mean, we didn't elaborate on it, but I found that interesting. I think it was mentioned by Tilo. Yeah. And there's then if it's a work of fiction, I mean, when it's clearly mentioned that it's work of fiction, then what is the problem from the community? Like, how do we define it as a problem from the community when author clearly states it's a work of fiction? Yeah, I mean, but again, I couldn't. If you just mention if it's a work of fiction, then everything could go under it, is what I felt when I heard about it. If I missed anything, I mean, my group members can come in and like. And also one more thing that Ravi mentioned was, do we advise him if there is clear evidence of violence because of his book? Should we advise or like go to the author just to play a devil's advocate and ask him to ban his book? So for the greater good, should we do that? Because it is helping the community and we see violence happening because of the book. Do we do that? Is that the right approach? Is one of the questions that also cropped up.
If I may add, also one more thought that came up was the difference between the right to, is it the intent of the person who says, I do not mean to do this, versus the effect that it has on the person who says they have been hurt. And in the US, at least, we have been taught that it's not the intent of the person, but the effect on the person affected that should be considered. So that was also another thing that was a point of consideration. Thanks.
Okay, so the next group, we'll have to go a little fast so that we keep within the time. So group number 2.
Yeah, okay. I'm assuming I'm group number 2, so I'll go ahead. So we had discussion where somebody mentioned that, yeah, it is actually we have to maintain the law and order. So the author should withdraw the book was one of the opinions. But one important question that was raised is, does this book violate Article 19.1 in terms of whether it is abusing the morality and decency, right? So that should be analyzed. So that question was raised. But the more important question which was discussed is, one of the members asked is, what if this was the other way around, right? Where that an author from a dominant community wrote about an oppressed community, is that acceptable in this manner, right? So then the question of where do we actually draw the line? So who is oppressed? So does that mean that the men can write about women, or should not write about women, or the other way around, or be it religion, can Hindus or Muslims write about each other? So where exactly do we draw the line, if that is the line we are, that is the line of questioning, right? So we're still there, no answers to that. But yeah, I mean, of course, one of the opinions was to approach the author should approach the judiciary as a recourse. But majorly, yeah, I think the Kudam stood with the author to say that it is the author's fundamental right. That should be protected, and that is the job of the government and the judiciary. I mean, please pitch in if I missed anything.
Anybody else?
Sorry. One other thing which is important point is, so I think this book being researched was brought in, right? So then it should be valid. So does that mean if it is maybe poorly researched or poorly written, that should be banned? Right? I think that was also an important question that made us think.
Okay. Yeah, Ashita, you want to say something? Or is
No,
it
no, I thumbs up. I agree. That's
okay? You agreed with what Shivaram said.
Yeah.
Anybody else from group 2? Want to fill in add anything to it? Group 3? Can we go to group 3? Who's going to present?
I can speak. In our group, we didn't think about the law and order being the issue for the author. It's rather the state's responsibility, and the morality and decency is also debatable. And the morality was mentioned by one of the group members as it's actually the constitutional morality, which is not really affected here. And the other thing is also one thing, it didn't occur to me at that moment, but it's occurring now. I think the state and the majority community has done a favor to the author and the book by calling it for banning, so that larger crowd starts getting the book now, wanting to read what exactly is there. So that way, I think it's already a good favor done. And so going to the court and then establishing his free speech is also an important step to go ahead. But now that I'm listening to the other two groups, I'm also wondering that how far the law and order issue can be held as a reasonable restriction.
Okay, thanks. And then anybody else from group 3? Okay. Arvind, you want to come in? Arvind is around?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Now, see, it's interesting to hear what many of you said. Some of you have said that you should read the right book to him, as I say, or read the Constitution. Some of you are sounding like you're politically correct. You know, in this particular class, everybody is going to talk about freedom of speech and expression. And but what was sort of redeeming in a very different sense, was that some of you said, we'll have to go and ask him to withdraw his book. Okay, the police are down, breathing down his neck. And what do we do at that particular time? Going to court is tomorrow. What do you do today? Okay, now this was an issue, which was a real issue, which we handled. And we went through that. We'll come back to how we handled it and what we did at a later point in time. But the issues that you all have raised is exactly this issue. Where does my freedom of speech and expression start? Where does it end? Is it without limit? Or if there is a limit, what is that limit? Is it absolute, as they call it legally? Is the freedom of speech and expression absolute, or is it limited? If it is limited, at what conditions or what situations are it limited? These are the questions that is coming in. The second aspect is, what is the freedom of speech and expression all about? Is it to talk the politically correct language? Is it to talk something that everybody thinks or accepts is right? Like I just said now a little while back, you are attending a class with people who have been fighting for human rights, and therefore it will be right to say that, and therefore let me not talk about it. If it's offending the feelings of women, which is part of the case study, then the author should be asked to take it back. Then you all got into this nitpicking detail about, is it research, is it not research, is it fictional, is it not fictional? Okay, and these are these are the type of issues that come in on a day-to-day basis in our lives. What can we talk? What can't we talk? Okay. And that's the issue that came up in this case. This book, the author of this book is a person called Perumal Murugan. And the book is a book called Madhuru Bhagan that he had written. And it's called One Half Woman in English. It is a Penguin book. It is a bestseller. Same time in January 2015, the entire controversy erupted. It blew up in such a big way that the crowds, the mobs, were not satisfied with him saying that, I'll change the name. I'll change the name of the places. I'll withdraw the books. They didn't want him. They literally wanted his head until he finally had to announce, I am dead. Perumal Murugan is dead. And he had his own name. He says that person is now going to be alive.
The author is dead.
The author is dead.
Yeah.
It created shockwaves all across India, also across the globe. And that was the time when they approached the POCL for help. Not just he and others. And they said, how do we deal with this? The cops are not supporting. The state is not supporting. The other people are not supporting. The political parties are now wanting to see which way the wind will blow. So as human rights groups, what do? How do you tell them? And we had to tell them on that day. It is not something like because you file a case that's going to come up tomorrow, day after tomorrow. What do we do on that day? And so on and so forth. So those were the issues that came in. Same issues are happening today. In fact, we'll circulate another news item that came up this morning, which I circulated within our inner group. We will share that with you. Okay. On a day-to-day basis, these issues are happening across India. You may remember the film Leelavati that came up about 2-3 years back. Then the whole issue is, whose sensibilities are we talking about? Whose sensitivities are we talking about? In what type of language do you talk about? Do you sanitize the language? 2 to 3 years back, there was an issue of how a Dalit writer writing about how he was treated and his community was treated by, I'm sorry, it's not Leelavati, it's Padmavati, Padmavat, that film. There was this, thanks, Saintan, for correcting me on that. There's a Dalit author who wrote about how he was treated by the caste Hindus, and the type of words that they use, the type of language that they use about him and his community. And the upper caste, the other community said, how dare you write about how we treated you? This is not true. It may have been true yesterday, but you can't talk about it today. Now he says, I'm writing about our experience. This is my lived experience or our community's lived experience. The other side says, by writing about it, you are defaming us. So you can't write about it. You will have to withdraw it. Okay. Then there's this whole textbook controversy that's going on in the country today. What is the right history? Which is the wrong history? Now, right history according to whom? Wrong history according to whom? Are very difficult issues that you're talking about. Now, please keep in mind what we discussed right in the beginning. In a diverse society like India, which is so disparate, which is so divided, so different, where do we draw the line in terms of what is morality, what is not morality, what is decency, etc. Okay, so that's a starting point for looking at briefly Article 19(1)(a) and the 19(2). Okay, and there are several other examples that we can talk about, which is there. We hope you found the case study interesting to talk about, to sort of look at how difficult it is when a case comes up in terms of free speech. Okay, Sarah, you want to add something?
No. So these are daily dilemmas. I mean, I think in Perumal Murugan case, all these issues came up. All the issues that all the 3 breakout groups have talked about morality, whether it is, demeaning the women, whether it is, affecting a particular caste community, whether it is true, whether it is not true. And so I think all these issues were brought up. We want to get into the case and finally, because this matter was argued in the Madras High Court and the court did give a decision in support of the author.
And they said that we have a fundamental, there is a concept called right to offend. And under what circumstances can we do right to offend? We'll come to a little minute. Very briefly, I'll take you through the broad contours of the law relating to speech. Now, 19(1)(2) says the state, which is the government, can impose restrictions. Don't change that, yeah? No. Go to that list. This is 19(2). We just summarized it. So the grounds that you can limit speeches on defamation, decency or morality, public order, security of state, contempt of court, friendly relations with foreign state, incitement to an offense, and maintenance of sovereignty and integrity. Okay. Now look at all these. This is what is provided in 1902. Now go back to that. Think of that cartoon. Where does that cartoon fall in the middle of all of this? Is it defamatory? Is it decency or morality? In terms of defamation, Subhashri had raised an issue. There's a separate law on defamation in India. We have both civil defamation and criminal defamation. Okay. Then the issue of decency and morality. Decency according to whom? Morality according to whom? Who decides this decency or morality? Now, for films, there's a film censor board. For books, there is no similar board, in terms of deciding what is right, what is wrong. Okay. Then public orders, security of state, etc. Now, these are the only conditions on which the state can limit a person's freedom of speech and expression. The question comes, what is the state's role in terms of balancing the citizen's right vis-a-vis the state's duty to also protect his right from being violated by others making unacceptable demands? Okay, just keep this question in mind as we go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. Now, why is free speech important in a country like India? Now, the point that we have taken is once we have accepted the rule of elections or what is called the ballot as a means of changing governments, in contrast to how it existed long years back, where changes of government or changes of regime was done through bullet. Okay, where there was bloodshed, there was war, and that's how one regime got overthrown by something else. Civilized societies, democratic societies, they said, we cannot have recourse to violence, but we will have recourse to elections and the ballot. So you replace the bullet by the ballot is again both a legal term as also a political term that we had. So in terms of opposing a ruling party so that people will not vote for them, how do you do it unless you also criticize the ruling group or the ruling party? Okay. So keeping this in mind, you also have to keep the other aspect of mind, which is the right of a person to express his own creativity, to express his ingenuity in whatever forms that there are. Okay. So one is the free speech is required in terms of individual self-fulfillment and self-expression. Should I be limited in terms of what I draw, what I paint, what I write as poetry, what I write as pictures, what films that I take, etc. Okay. Then advancing knowledge and the discovery of truth. Okay. Creating a critically informed and discerning community of citizens. This is directly related to our democracy and our democratic way of life. Okay. If you have to have elections once in 5 years, you need to have citizens who are critically informed. Now, if the cartoon, going back to the discussion we had, some of you had said it creates anger in us, it makes us feel helpless. Okay. And it also raises a question, what do I do about the sense of helplessness? Okay. Why am I conditioned like this? Okay. So how do we create a discerning community of citizens unless you're able to get people to think about what they are and where they are? It could be through cartoons, it could be through text, it could be through stories, it could be any variety of forms. Okay.
Even memes these days.
Yes, these days memes and other things. Okay. The speech is also important in terms of participating in decision making and democratic processes. Okay. And finally, also respect and tolerance for diverse antagonistic sects of thoughts, beliefs, and ways of life. If there's an atheist and the atheist says, I also have to have my thought expressed, but somebody else says, no, I believe in a God and there can be no place for atheists in the country. Okay, I'm talking about all of these issues which have become political issues and legal issues, fought on the streets, fought in the political spaces, as also which have gone to court. So these are the different dimensions of free speech which are very required. As we shall see in the next one. Okay. Dissent. Now, dissent is a very, very important element of democracy. Okay. Now, it is not just political. See, dissent we always associate it with being political, but it is also cultural. Okay. And dissent is a speech that it criticizes not just the ruling government, it also criticizes existing customs, habits, traditions, institutions, laws, and authorities. A very important case went up from Tamil Nadu to the Supreme Court. It was a case about a film in which the main character becomes an IAS officer.
She is a Brahmin who gives a false caste certificate and uses the benefit of reservation and becomes an IAS officer.
And as an
Subsequently, I mean, she is a very, very good IAS officer who does a lot of good for the community, very well loved, respected, etc., etc. But in the end, it comes to light that she has given a fake certificate. So in the movie ends with her giving a speech opposing reservation, saying that ultimately merit is suffering. People like me don't have an opportunity to come up in life, and the movie ends with her speaking in the court, criticizing the whole reservation policy. It's in Tamil, Ore Oru Gramathile, there is a movie. And at that time, actually a very poorly made movie, and I think it hardly ran in the theaters, but there was a lot of hue and cry over it. And when the matter was, many of you suggested the author should go to court. In this case, the producer did go to court. Producer was S. Rangarajan. He did go to court. The Madras High Court, however, said that opposing reservation is bad, and hence said that the film should be banned. They upheld that, and then he went up to the Supreme Court, and then Supreme Court in the case which now you see as Rangarajan versus Jagjeevan Ram, this is the one, no? They finally said no. I mean, because one of the grounds on which the Madras High Court said is that it created law and order because people were protesting outside the theaters where it was being carried. So finally, the Supreme Court in that case held, I mean, people may protest, but it is a duty of the state to give enough protection so that citizens can actually enjoy the fundamental rights which are guaranteed. So that is the role of the state, not to curtail the rights, but to facilitate the expression of their rights.
Any questions? Thoughts? Okay, they're just yeah.
Sorry. So when I'm seeing this dissent, that I mean, like, how do we think about the restrictions, the reasonable restrictions that were placed on the freedom of speech? Now, how do they look like in this case when we are trying to understand dissent? I mean, like, the question is like, where do we draw the line, basically? I think that.
Correct. It's an important question. Arvind, would you like to come in here?
Sure. I think that's as you said, Suresh, it's a very, very important and very good question. And I think the point to think about is that you have to think of the question of freedom of speech and expression from the earlier slide, right? From a slightly more conceptual or a philosophical framework, and even be prepared to say that we need to interpret the reasonable restrictions in the light of a broader understanding of freedom of speech and expression itself. And again, if you go back to the Constituent Assembly debates, it's a range of members had very, very big problems with the restrictions of freedom of speech and expression. The point they made is, on one hand, you're giving rights, the other hand, you're taking them away. So that sense of ambivalence and sense of dissatisfaction with the clause was there from the very beginning itself. Why I'm making this point is that the question of, if you have a sense of clarity about what the values are, then you look at the Constitution through that lens, right? And then you look at, for example, I mean, the clause on morality, right? As one of you said, you think of morality within the language of constitutional morality. So morality can't just today be the opinion of the majority alone. It has to be a morality which is rooted in the Constitution in terms of a respect for the other fundamental rights. Again, you go back to the point which we made a little earlier last class, right? 19(1)(a) is not a standalone provision, right? You have to think of it in the light of the other provisions of the Constitution. So how does, you looked at 19(1)(a), the earlier slide indicated that it's a question of self-expression, It's a question of your ability or your possibility to change the society you live in. A range of reasons why it's an important right. So try and contextualize it in terms of thinking about the right itself. And if you look at the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court, again, you'll see, right, that it's not blindly, right? If you read the Perumal Murugan judgment, actually Suresh not telling you he's the one who argued the matter. If you look at that particular judgment, and so we can get a lot more details from him on that point. Or you look at other range of Anand Patwardhan cases, right? All of which, for example, the court has given a positive order and recognized freedom of speech and expression. So there's a way in which the importance of it, regardless of what the community may think of you, has been recognized by the court. So there's that very important dimension of it. And you think again the interpretation principle. Think of rights and restrictions as not as co-equal. They're not they shouldn't be thought of at the same scale, right? Right is the important point. Restriction should always construed more narrowly. Right? You can't interpret the restriction so broadly, the right becomes meaningless, right? So which means that you interpret the restriction in a narrower way. I'll give you one more example. Everybody said law and order, right? But the language which 19.2 uses, if you read it again, is public order. It doesn't say law and order. And is there a distinction between public order and law and order? And again, because of the case law before the court, the ways in which that concept has been interpreted, right? For example, there's one particular case, Ram Manohar Lohiya's case, which if you read, there's a very interesting distinction. What they call law and order, public order, and national security, right? And the way they interpret it is, law and order is when, assuming it'll never happen, assuming me and Suresh are fighting on the street, right? At best, it's a law and order issue. The rest of the world is not concerned with it, right? But if it's two communities which are clashing on the streets, the public order issue, and the national security is a much higher threshold. It's when the very existence of the state is threatened, right? So language can't be used casually or loosely, right? And the state can't plead law and order as a reason to restrict your fundamentals. As somebody rightly said, the state's responsibility to ensure law and order. The state is a monopoly of the forces of legitimate coercion, as it were. What is the state doing? We all know if the state deploys its we know that. In Karnataka, we know that. We talk of Shriram Sene, right? Which is the bully organization, the vigilante organization. When they threaten people, at best, it's not like thousands and thousands of people, a few people who lead the entire process. So the state completely knows how to ensure that your freedom of speech and expression in very difficult circumstances can be guaranteed. The state doesn't know what to do. That's a different question. Right? So we have to figure out a way to think about these various notions: law and order, public order, national security. That's one kind of notion. Second, restriction of the entire question of decency and morality. How do you see decency and morality in the context of the constitutional morality? Right? So the ways in which you have to think, I think, of the restriction more narrowly than think of the right, so that you fit very, very well with other provisions of the Constitution. Right? If you can't have 19.2 following up not only 19.1, but following up your right to dignity, which is part of your right to expression. You can't have it following up a right to equality. You can't have it following up a range of the other rights which are guaranteed.
Thanks, Arvind. If we can go back to the slide which talks about the restrictions, we just briefly take you through each one of them. Again, the idea is not to get into a legal discussion. The idea is just so that you understand how do we interpret these things in our day-to-day life. The nature of restrictions. Yeah, the next slide. Yeah, the one that no, yeah, the earlier one.
Much before Sayantan, where summary of restrictions on free speech.
Yeah, the defamation.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
yes.
This is the one. Thank you. So this is the language, like just now what Arvind was mentioning. You cannot, while yes, it's very difficult to decide. It's on a case-to-case basis whether something constitutes defamation. For instance, when we were looking at the first cartoon that we saw, it very clearly you can identify Amit Shah and Narendra Modi. So will that amount to defamation? Because there are two very clearly identifiable persons. now decency or morality. Now we have seen the Perumal Murugan case. Now there, the entire the main core of the story itself, is it opposed to the today's society's idea of decency and morality and public order? There have been protests. So does it mean that it is a public order? Then security of state, contempt of court. I think in the first slide you have seen that now the court is also joining that circle to protect Adani. So can the Supreme Court or the High Court now take offense to that cartoon and say, oh, you are now undermining the judiciary, you are defaming the judiciary, it's a contempt of court. So is it open to say that? Friendly relations with foreign state? Well, in this it may not happen. But yeah, supposing you were criticizing something which involves another state.
It's happening now in the Palestine issue, when any group is wanting to protest against the genocide that's taking place in Gaza, the government of India and the various state governments are not permitting any protests on this ground of foreign state.
Incitement to an offense and maintenance of sovereign integrity. So now we'll just try to give you because there's only that much that we can do in 2 hours, but the idea is to make you think. So the first principle that you need to understand, which Arvind had just mentioned, is that in legal context, when there is a rule and an exception to the rule, now these limitations are in the nature of an exception to your right to freedom of speech. So you cannot interpret your exceptions in such a broad, wide manner so as to actually nullify the main freedom itself. So you will have to bear that principle in mind. So while interpreting these reasonable restrictions, these words, you will have to bear in mind that if you give such an interpretation, will it end in actually curtailing the freedom of speech and expression itself? So defamation. Now going back to the cartoon again. Just the presence of Narendra Modi and Amit Shah in that, will it amount to defaming them? That was a question which had come up. And rightly so. Because there is a thought in each one's, very often we come across such situations. Every day you have cartoons with exaggerated features of
that's why it's a
people.
cartoon.
You had, I think, earlier cartoons, you had Indira Gandhi with an extra kind of a nose coming out, long nose. Most cartoons are very exaggerated in terms of the visuals and even in terms of the text. So in the context of defamation, the courts have come across, like in Tamil Nadu recently, you have had, there is a movement called the Arapor Iyakam, which is a anti-corruption body, a voluntary body, where they have been taking on corruption of, the ministers in Tamil Nadu, and very specifically have named serving ministers and the former chief minister, calling out and saying that they have actually indulged in acts of corruption. Now, all these ministers have ganged up and filed about 15 defamation cases against this organization, which are, some of them have been withdrawn subsequently, some are still going on. Now, you have had environmental activists who have called out on the pollution of, certain industries. For instance, Chemplast pollution was exposed by certain environmental activists. So, Chemplast has filed a case of defamation against the environmental activists. Earlier, you have had, I think, Tata filing cases against Greenpeace activists. So now in this situation, the courts have come up with certain categories. For instance, in respect of people in public life. So they say when people are in public life, and as long as your criticism is in respect of their activities as people in public life, in the course of whatever is their, public activity. I mean, if it's a minister or if it's an MLA or an MP, now criticizing them for their acts which they have done in the public domain, it is part of the democratic right of a citizen to critique them. And they cannot be so sensitive. So the courts have developed what is called the doctrine of thick skin, and said people in public life should learn to develop thick skin. You can't be hypersensitive and get agitated at every criticism that is thrown at you, and every such criticism, unless you are actually going into their personal lives. So if they start attacking them in their personal lives, which is whether it is their personal relationships or families. If it is touching their personal domain, yes, then maybe it is defamation. But otherwise, people in public life should be open to accept criticism, and you cannot say that it falls under within this reasonable restriction. Because if that is so, then nobody can critique any person, any public officer, or a bureaucrat, or even the judges. Similarly, decency or morality. Would you like to expand on decency?
Yeah, on the whole issue of decency and morality, it's a very slippery slope. Like, whose decency, whose morality? So in the Perumal Murugan case where we argued about the fact that decency and morality are very subjective phenomenon. It depends upon who is at which hierarchical status in caste society or other society. So the issue that came up in that case, which is similar to other issues also that have come up, is the fact that do you judge yesterday's practice by today's decency ideas? How do you look at morality in terms of a different sociological context or a social context? Should you take the social context at all in deciding on morality? Because what may be morality for me may be very different from morality to somebody else from a different caste. Okay, so we said that there cannot be any basic position that it is a generic morality or a generic decency. It has to be restricted. It has to be looked at in the specific context of a particular sociological or a historical phenomenon before you can think about limiting it. Okay, so constitutional morality therefore comes in, and Arvind very beautifully put it. It's not just 19(1)(a), freedom of speech and expression, the freedom to talk, freedom to write, etc. But it is also linked to the original principles in the preamble of dignity, of fraternity, and various other things. So a lower caste person writing about caste discrimination as it existed 100 years back in the same language that that was used against them may offend somebody from the upper caste in today's morality, but that cannot be the ground to deny you the right to speak or write about it or to express it or to expand on what happened in those times. Okay.
So I don't know how many of you are following the controversy over the singer, T.M. Krishna. I don't know if you all have been following, where he had written a book critiquing, the famous singer M.S. Subbulakshmi. And because, if you have not, please look it up. It's all over the internet. He has recently been given the Sangeeta Kalanidhi Award by the Music Academy in Chennai. And there has been a lot of furor over it, that why should Music Academy, honor T.M. Krishna? So please look it up. So it gives you that all these debates are very much on. It's just happening all around you. Then public order.
Wait, one second. On issue of morality, the Supreme Court has also said, because many of these issues have gone, that what should be the basic standard? Should be the standard of a person who's an average guy out there, who says that his sense of decency and morality is offended? Or do you take it in the sense that it has to be a basic citizen for cutting across any or all our other divisions, and it cannot be the very hypersensitive, extra sensitive person by which you decide on what is decency and morality. Okay, obviously this is very contextual, but the important point there being that obviously when somebody is writing on something, somebody may be getting offended, but every sense of being offended cannot be the basis for denying or curtailing the right of free speech. Now, public order, this one, Arvind had already drawn attention to something called law and order, which is what we all hear. Okay, public order is of a higher grade than law and order. Law and order is, say, supposing there's a particular skirmish that happens, a particular incident that happens, it creates fear amongst the local people at that particular time. Many other people gather and it can become unruly. That's law and order. Public order is much more different. Public order is something where a situation exists which it can threaten the general situation in society. Okay, so there.
Now let's go back to that slide, the earlier one, Sayantan, because we just want to quickly run through each one of them to just give you a broad idea. Yeah. Okay. So, like Supreme Court in one case has explained public order, law and order, and national security as concentric circles. So the smallest circle is national security. The circle next to it, around it, is public order. The larger circle is law and order. So law and order will encompass so many things. Protest, any, any section like the farmers are protesting. See, you'll also have to bear in mind, just as we had mentioned earlier, that don't forget the preamble and the other fundamental rights, and 19, because all travel together. And in 19, one of the other guarantees is your right to freedom of association. And your freedom of association is part of the freedom of association, and to gather without arms is also part of the guarantees. So people gathering in large numbers and protesting with CAA, we saw protests across the country. Even that is not a public order.
In fact, there's a duty on the state to protect law and order. The state cannot say that there are a lot of people who are agitated, they will come and they'll create a law and order problem, and therefore we cannot allow you. It's happened to an anti-corruption group last Sunday, day before, 3 days back. They were supposed to have a protest in Chennai against Adani, and the complaints given about Adani, which are not being registered in FAR. At the very last moment, the city police, and they gave a application for permission 1 month earlier. But on Saturday, I think in the morning, they were informed by the police that permission has been refused on the ground that they had intelligence input. Lots of people are going to come there, and there might be a law and order problem. Okay, the group argued back to the police saying, law and order is your domain. You have to ensure that there is protection of people in terms of law and order. You cannot use that as an excuse to deny us our right to assemble peaceably. That's one of the fundamental rights, and our right to free speech and expression. Okay, so both of those things go together. Okay.
And now coming to security of state. Now security of state, every criticism of the government, like the farmers are now protesting against the government, they are making a demand. So now every such situation cannot be turned into they are attacking the state, so the state is vulnerable. The state is not so vulnerable that every small protest by citizens, even a big protest by citizens, cannot threaten the security of state. So then again, contempt of court, criticizing judgments, critiquing the judgments, or even calling out something which you have seen of late, criticisms about how the chief justices, the earlier judges of the Supreme Court, have conducted themselves across these decades. Now none of this can constitute contempt. Contempt is something where you are lowering the dignity of the courts. That is undermining. Now these are all very difficult terms. I mean, it's I'm at the end of it, all of us have questions. It has to be something which is decided on a case-to-case basis. But I think what you need to keep in mind, that when you are interpreting reasonable restrictions, you will have to give them a very, very narrow and a strict interpretation. And you can't expand it to include just about everything, because in doing so, you are actually then swallowing the right to free speech itself. Because if each of these items are taken, like each one's idea of morality, decency, defamation, then nobody can write a book, nobody can make a movie, nobody can, draw a cartoon. So that is what you need to essentially keep in mind, because as we have told you that none of these, restrictions can be very easily defined. And that's what the courts have also said. On a case-to-case basis, it is examined. But this is a broad principle that you will have to keep in mind.
Just 2 or 3 simple principles that the Supreme Court has evolved over the years. One is that the effect of the words must be judged by the standards of reasonable, strong-minded, firm and courageous men and women, persons, and not those of weak and vacillating minds, nor of those who smell danger with every point of view. Okay, so the test is that of a reasonably strong-minded person and not somebody who is looking at conspiracies and everything. Now look at the condition in India today. Now, condition has been created that questioning the government is now being told to people is wrong. It's immoral, it's unethical, it's undemocratic, because it's against the security of the state, it's against our sovereignty. So you have a young generation which is growing up thinking protesting against the police is wrong, protesting against the state is wrong, questioning the government, questioning the IAS officers is wrong. Then you're obviously going to create a situation in which democracy is going to be affected very, very badly. Okay. Now, the other things is they've said is that many times a statement is taken out in isolation. A particular scene in a film is taken out in isolation. A text in a poem is taken out in isolation. The test is, the courts have said that you have to look at it in its entirety. You can't pluck out one part and say this part is bad. You have to look at it in its entirety and see what is the entire message talk and what was the filmmaker trying to talk about. Now, there's an important issue here, and we'll end up with this and invite Arvind to also talk about Gandhiji's trial, because it's very much linked to the last part, incitement to offense and maintenance of sovereignty and integrity, which is that we have to look at the freedom of speech and expression in two different ways. One, the freedom of the person who's creating the message. Okay, it could be a painter, it could be a filmmaker, it could be a poet, it could be a dramatist, it can be anybody. The person who's making the message. There's a attendant right. What about all these creative actions are meant for somebody to consume it or somebody to absorb it. So what about the person who's reading, who's seeing, who's watching? Do those people also have a right? Okay, and that's a very, very important element of the freedom of speech and expression. Just as much as I have the right to talk, the other person also has a right to hear me or to see me or to read me. So it's the freedom of speech and expression is two ways. The freedom of speech of the person making the originator of the communication and the person receiving it. There's a very fundamental notion to it, saying that ultimately I need to be an informed citizen. How do I get informed? How do I become an informed citizen? Unless I have access to all type of information about any particular thing, good, bad, ugly, and so that I can make up my own mind as to what I think is right. So by curtailing the creator of a communication, you are in effect also curtailing or violating the right of the recipient of your information. That would also amount to violation of freedom of speech and expression. So it's a two-way thing. So it's not just the person, it's also the person who's receiving it. Again, some of them are slippery slopes, but please keep these various issues in mind. There's a difference between regulating it and the difference between controlling it or completely suppressing it. So when you're talking about a fundamental right, we're talking about a right which overrides various other things. And in the name of limiting it, you can't curtail it. Like in the particular case, the police says law and order problem is going to be there, women are agitating, but it is their duty and responsibility to maintain law and order and not to use that as an occasion to ask people to withdraw their creative activities. Okay, we'll stop here. There are many more things to cover. Obviously, very difficult to do it in a short time. I'd like to invite Arvind to talk about this, about Gandhiji's sedition trial and other points that he's been working on. Arvind.
Right, yeah. Just to perhaps add one extra point to what Suresh and Saila mentioned, which is what is your concept of the democracy that we live in, right? Is it what you call an eggshell democracy? We're always scared what the other person is going to say, but even more robust imagination of the democracy we live in. Brings up to another concept which is there in US law, which is the idea of what is called the heckler's veto. We all know, right? If you go to a public program, somebody starts shouting. Rest of us might want to attend the program, but because that chap is shouting, none of us can hear what actually is going on, right? So the point is, just the loudest person shouldn't have the way of restricting your right and my right, which was Suresh made the point, right? Your right and my right to listen to what is going on. So there's something the court shouldn't necessarily listen to the loudest voices. And that goes back to the Perumal Murugan point, right? Just because a community is deeply upset, or not even a community, people who claim to represent the community are deeply upset, the court can't go with just what the majority thinks. The court has to go with what is mandated by the Constitution. So again, we get back to the point that the court's responsibility is to look at it within the frame of the Constitution. They might not always succeed in that, but that's our effort, to push the court to say, this is your responsibility. To look at this entire issue, not within the question of is the majority sentiment affected, but in terms of what the Constitution mandates. Again, if we go back to the NAS Foundation Delhi High Court decriminalization of same-sex relationships judgment, that's the point they make. They said that morality could be a shifting standard. It could be something which the majority believes in. But what we are bound by is not a shifting standard in what the majority believes in. We are bound by what you call constitutional morality, which is rooted in the Constitution. So that's the responsibility which is vested upon the courts. Why this is important is by the discussion itself we realize, right? Not everybody's on board this way of thinking, right? And our effort is to say that we need to think like this. Only when we think like this, or only when we're convinced of this viewpoint, can we push the court to say this is the viewpoint you need to accept. If you yourself say, oh no, majorities or the majority claims it's upset, the community representatives are upset, and so there's no choice. We should shut the chap out. Then what happens? Then what happens is going back to Gautam Bhatia's book, right? What is his point? What is the point of calling the book Offend, Shock, and Disturb? The point of the book is this: that the importance of freedom of speech and expression is such that we must have the right to offend, shock, and disturb. What are the limitations on the question of the offend, shock, and disturb? The limitations are, again, you have to think within the framework of the Constitution. And in particular, I think a lot of people raise these questions. You have to think within the notion that when what you're saying goes beyond the standard of offending, shocking, and disturbing, and what it does is incites violence against a grouping, that is prohibited, and that should be prohibited, right? And again, we know that a lot of the times, for example, the question of hate speech is about inciting violence, discrimination against grouping, and that you need to prohibit. It's not always an easy standard to find, but we have to think conceptually and say what is the framework you adopt in thinking of freedom of speech and expression. One other point to keep in mind is often people say that this is a problematic viewpoint, ban it, right? And I think the response in a lot of cases should be speech should be fought with more speech. Your response, if somebody says, I'm really offended by Perumal Murugan's book, your offense, okay, you write another book, write a response to it, say why you think it's problematic. That's totally valid within the constitutional frame. Why isn't the response? Why can't we push for a response that says that we agree with whoever's writing Perumal Murugan's right to offend, shock, and disturb? If you are so offended, you write a counter viewpoint. Speech should be countered with more speech. It should be countered by bringing on the heavy hand of the law, saying we stop the speech, but we countered by more speech. Which takes me to, again, now Gandhiji's thoughts, right? And it's very interesting, again, I think I mentioned this once before. We often think of Gandhiji within more the register of more a spiritual register now, of course, because of Mr. Modi's wonderful contribution, Swachh Bharat. We confine it to Swachh Bharat, not even to prohibit manual scavenging, but Swachh Bharat. Middle class people sweeping the streets. That's Gandhiji for you. That's why he's sought to be confined by the past that we. But I think, again, this is what is calls for building a constitutional imagination. You go back to Gandhiji's work, you'll find that one of the most powerful and strong advocates of the freedom of speech and expression is him. And think again, right? What do we know of Gandhiji? We know the fact that he's very, very committed to the question of, taking not just me speaking to you, you speaking to me, right? What was the big thing he did in South Africa? Establish a printing press. What is the big thing he did in India? Again, establish a range of presses through which his opinion could circulate to a wider public. So it was very central and very key idea which he took forward is the question of freedom of speech and expression. If you ask me, I think the strongest kind of value which he brings is the question of freedom of speech and expression. I'm just going to share my screen a little bit and take you through some of what he had to say. Yeah, can you see the document?
Yeah, it's visible. Your screen's visible.
Again. Okay. You can see the document?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody please see, there's two very central points he makes of freedom of speech and expression. And I think it's important that we just read it out. Somebody please read out the first italicized statement by Gandhi?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
We must first make good the right of free speech and free association before we can make any further progress towards our goals. We must defend these elementary rights with our lives. Liberty of speech means that it is unassailed even when the speech hurts. Liberty of the press can be said to be truly respected only when the press can comment in the severest terms upon and even misrepresented matters. Freedom of association is truly respected when assemblies of people can discuss even revolutionary projects.
Just that you read these three concepts there, right? I mean, he's articulating the idea of open, shock, and disturb, right? In a time before we started, before Mr. Bhatia wrote this book and came up with this thought, it's there in these thoughts. And the second quotation, please.
Civil liberties consistent with the observance of non-violence are the first step towards Swaraj. It is the breadth of political and social life. It is the foundation of freedom. There is no room there for dilution or compromise. It is the water of life.
Yeah. So you read this, then I mean, I was convinced that the strongest advocate you have on the question of freedom of speech and expression is Mahatma Gandhi. And the language again, right? When you say breadth of political and social life, it's not a rhetorical statement alone. What he's saying when it's breadth of political and social life is if you want to bring about change or transformation, right? You need this right. You need this right, and he showed it in his life, right? When you establish a printing press, it is that. It is you're taking the breadth of political and social life to say, I want to bring about change or transformation by getting my opinion out to a wider public. That's really the first step, right? Again, the 1901 ABC, right? Sailam made this point. It's speech, association, assembly. The critical right, which are your charter for bringing about political and social transformation. And again, I'll find the article, and I was thinking of it. I'll find the article and send it to you. There's an excellent piece by Kannabiran in the book called Wages of Impunity, which if you get a chance again, please do read it, where he makes this point. He says the critical point for bringing about transformation and change begins with 1901A, then moves on to 1901B and 1901C. That is, you speak alone, you may not get hurt. But if you speak in the form of an association, for a group or an association, your voice is magnified severalfold. And if you have, with the association that you form, you're able to protest on the streets in large numbers, you're able to take forward your viewpoint to public assemblies, then the state has cannot avoid listening to your voice. That's why it's the breadth of political and social life, and it is the foundation of freedom. So again, you think of Gandhi within the civil liberties frame. This is really, I mean, it's a great charter. It's a really great charter of thinking of, even for the PUCL, thinking of Gandhi as a civil libertarian, right, or a civil liberties advocate. Before the term civil liberties was taken up in the Indian Constitution. So again, if you think of the backdrop to the Constitution of Freedoms, it really comes from, I think what again I reference is, if you say C1 constitutional text, C2 constitutional interpretation, C3 is the Constitutional Assembly debates and the larger political context from which we draw a freedom struggle, from which we draw these rights. This is it, right? And so again, we have to understand the freedom struggle in terms of these liberties. Very, very vital, very, very important. Then now I want to go down to the text all of you guys I hope read, which is it's a very short text, but I think a very brilliant text on the Gandhi's sedition trial. And the question to ask is, what was Gandhi being tried for? Why was he tried for sedition? What did he say? Right? And just we'll go a little further down, and you have two. I'm not going to read out both, but let's just read this. Okay, let's read both actually. Soon after Jallianwala Bagh, this part, and the next one.
Soon after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, in an article titled Tampering with Loyalty, he noted that he shall not hesitate at the peril of being shot to ask the Indian sepoy individually to leave his service and become a weaver. For has not the sepoy been used to hold India under subjection? Has he not been used to murder innocent people at Jallianwala Bagh? Has he not been used to subjugate the proud Arab of Mesopotamia? The sepoy has been used more often as a hired assassin than as a soldier defending the liberty of the weak and helpless.
And this the next paragraph is of this.
He goes on to say, sedition has become the creed of the Congress. Every non-cooperator is pledged to preach disaffection towards the government established by law. Non-cooperation, though a religious and strictly moral movement, deliberately aims at the overthrow of the government and is therefore legally seditious in terms of the Indian Penal Code.
Excellent. So this is what he writes in 3 articles, and which is why the government files a case of sedition under 124A against him, right? And again, I think you guys must hopefully have read the speech. We don't have time to go. Can you see the speech now? Corrected words? Can you see?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So, okay, I'm not going to read the whole speech, obviously, because we don't have the time. But the point I'll make very briefly to say that I think the whole speech is totally worth reading. And if you read the speech again, it's a way in which you turn or you think against the normal way people work with the criminal law, and you look at the possibilities of the potential of dissent within the framework of the existing legal framework, right? What is the framework from the entire question of accepting the fact that you've committed the offense and pleading for the highest possible punishment? The statement which he makes in court, again, you can think of the statement. You have to read the course. This is the early statement. I mean, in terms of great political trials, you have Mandela's statement in the Livonia trial, and think of Fidel Castro's statement on history will absolve me in the Cuban context. All these again, it's a completely different linked, but it's a great dimension to look at the potential of the law on what you can do creatively with the existing legal framework. And all of them used it to incredible political effect in terms of Mandela, Gandhi, and of course Castro. But the Gandhi trial again, right? If you read the Gandhi statement again, of course, what he produces is a charge sheet against the British government, right? In terms of civil and political oppression, which is Jallianwala Bagh and the Rowlatt Act. The question of social and economic rights denial, which is the entire question of what he calls skeletons in the villages, as it were. And finally, he gets to the law under which he's tried, which is the sedition provision. We'll just read that one short provision, and we'll end with that. Yeah. From this marked portion, can you see section 124?
Can somebody who's not read so far read?
Yeah, I can.
I'll read.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Section 124 from there. Yeah.
Section 124, under which I am happily
Tilak, can we
charged.
have somebody else who's not read this? Sorry.
Yeah, just so that we have different voices. Yeah.
Can
Sorry.
I try?
Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Section 124A, under which I am happily charged, is perhaps the prince among the political sections of the Indian Penal Code, designed to suppress the liberty of the citizen. Affection cannot be manufactured or regulated by law. If one has no affection for a person or system, one should be free to give the fullest expression to his disaffection, so long as he does not contemplate, promote, or incite to violence. But the section under which Mr. Banker and I are charged is one under which more promotion of disaffection is a crime. I have studied some of the cases tried under it, and I know that some of the most loved of India's patriots have been convinced under it.
Have been convicted under it.
Have been convicted under it. I consider it a privilege, therefore, to be charged under it. I have endeavored to give in the briefest outline the reasons for my disaffection. I have no personal ill will against any single administrator
much less can I have any disaffection towards the king's person. But I hold it to be a virtue to be disaffected towards a government which, in its totality, has done more harm to India than any previous system. India is less manly under the British rule than she ever was before. Holding such belief, I consider it to be a sin to have affection for the system. And it has been a precious privilege for me to be able to write what I have in the various articles tendered in evidence against me.
Thanks. We don't have time to look at the provision itself, but I urge you to go back to the, again, this is the way you think of the law, right? Go back to the 124A provision. And why this language of affection comes again and again? Because 124A, the language says, exciting disaffection against the government established by law. Again, think of the creative potential here. Gandhi is playing with the word disaffection and affection, right? And again, the statement is a great one. Affection cannot be manufactured or regulated by law, right? So basically, he's saying, I can't be compelled to love the government. If I don't love the government and it's giving you a chart sheet on reasons why it doesn't love the government, if I don't love you, I will tell you why I don't love you, and that's disaffection, right? As long as, of course, I do not contemplate, promote, or incite to violence, right? So again, the question of promotion of disaffection is your constitutional right, or not in this case. There's no constitution to talk about, but you can read it as a fundamental articulation of the value of the freedom of speech and expression. So that's why sedition never have been in the should have been deleted when the constitution came into force. But again, one quick point on this. Previously, I mean, it was even worse because during the debates in the Constitutional Assembly, the draft constitution had among the reasonable restriction clause had sedition. Because of you read the Constitutional Assembly debates, so many members spoke up and said that we've been tried under sedition, Gandhi was tried under sedition, we've all gone to jail because of sedition. We can't have this as a reasonable restriction. So finally, they dropped sedition from 1902, and they never got wrong, or never did repeal 124A. Of course, the last quick point on this, 124A is the Supreme Court stays the operation of 124A, I think a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, and so no further cases could have been registered under sedition. And today, it's not there anymore because there's a new law, BNS, which has come into place. I'm not going to tell you what BNS stands for because, it's a complicated Hindi word, but that comes into place now. And the point is, 124A is replaced by another provision, 152 BNS, and 152 BNS, so it doesn't use the language of disaffection, is actually broader in its criminalization of what it calls the incitement of separation, or even thinking of separation. That's the language which it uses. So, I mean, you have to think of again the way the law has come back in a sense, right? 124A is gone, but it's come back in another form. And again, we need to be conscious of it and aware of it and see how we can begin to challenge that as well. Yeah, I'll just end with that.
We have removed the word disaffection and replaced it with the word feeling. Now, feeling is like, how do you measure feeling? Or how do you identify feeling? And that's how the change that has been brought about in the sedition law, they superficially have removed 124A, but they've replaced it with a much more stringent law in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita under section 152. We have come out with a detailed explanation of this. Any of you are interested, please write to us. We can send you a POCL came out with a very detailed thing to explain what the change is about. But that's a different issue. Let's get back to this, and maybe we hope we have given you a flavor. We have prepared a much bigger PowerPoint which we can share with you all, so you can go through it at your own pace, which sort of distills many years and years of fight on freedom of speech and expression. So we'll just end up here, and thanks Arvind for ending up with this very with Gandhiji's quote, which is very inspiring. All the 3 ones that you have used. We hope that all of you all have had the similar sense of inspiration about how Gandhi conceptualized civil liberties and human rights and the freedom of speech and expression as the central core of democracy. You remove that, many other things, you're removing the basis of democracy itself. So we'll stop here. Can we?
One comment which I wanted to add is that in the breakup groups, I mean, I think more or less everybody said, Perumal Murugan should go to court, which he did, and he succeeded, fortunately. But I think the majority said he should go to court, he should go to court. But Gandhiji was convicted of sedition. And many more. Today you have the Bhima Koregaon people who are behind bars, not coming out on bail. Bail itself is proving to be difficult. And
the Delhi cases.
So going
Umar
to
Khalid still.
Yeah, so while going to court is definitely an option, I think we all have to go back to the opening sentence of the preamble, which is we the people. So please do not underestimate the importance of we the people and the importance of all of us being engaged with the subject of freedom of speech and expression. It is not for the individual person whose right is being violated to go to court, which is definitely one remedy available to that person. But I think it is something which is affecting each one of us, and all of us have to protest in support of supporting the freedom of speech of the person whose freedom is being curtailed by the state. So that is one point because going to courts can be tricky. As I said in Oreoru Gramathule case, Madras High Court had in fact upheld the state's ban of the film. Then it was only in the Supreme Court. Now all this process took years, and in the meantime the film could not be released. And much later, several years later, when everything was forgotten, the film was released. I think the same happened to even Anand Patwardhan's film, where the Bombay High Court had to intervene. So yeah, so this is again just food for thought that courts can't leave entirely everything to the courts, and courts also respond to public opinion. So you please keep that in mind.
Okay. Can we just have a couple of people speaking about
If there are any
what
comments?
they're thinking? Any comments about now?
Sir, I had a question.
Yeah.
With regards to what you just mentioned about this Arapur Ekam's Sunday protest that was cancelled.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is a longer conversation. Maybe we can have it in the mini Kudam. Now, with regards to what happened with the Perumal Murugan thing and with these guys now, in the practical aspect of things, what happened, what should have happened, and is there better ways that we could have done something on that regard? Maybe that's something that we have to talk about. Because going back to that cartoon, maybe in this case, along with Amit Shah and Modi, maybe Stalin is also standing in that circle. No? That's possibly why they didn't want Adani to have any protest. They didn't allow any protest against Adani. So yeah, that's.
But you are right, Mohammed. See, unless we, the common people of India, also protest every time attempt is made to suppress free speech. See, right now it's not there. There are not enough people making enough noise to say why it's important. Like, for example, after the Arapur thing happened, there should have been 100 letters to the editor. There should have been different groups writing about it. And I'll give you an example. After the PFI, the banning of the Popular Front of India, many political parties themselves thought that it's now been banned under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. If we talk about it, then we will also get banned. See, until the PUCL, we came out with a statement saying that my right to criticize the banning is different from the allegation that I'm therefore supporting a particular group. I have a right to criticize the banning of an organization as a terrorist organization. Okay, and that's very different from saying that I am therefore supporting that organization. Only after we came out with a statement like that did many political parties actually call us. Actually, they called us up to say, then can we issue a statement against the ban? We said, please go ahead. But by the time this thing happened, it was about 5-6 days. It should have been done immediately. So likewise, we have to be vigilant, for which we need to know. And we also need to be informed about the law.
And how very often, these kind of things instill fear in each one of us. So there is self-censorship. So every time now everybody, so that is part of the intended result, this all these bans and filing cases and, now asking that cartoon, they have written to Twitter to bring it down. It's creating a sense of fear in everyone. So which is even the mainstream political parties are afraid to speak up.
Which is why we said we have to bring home the constitution. It starts from each one of us. What do we do? And what are we going to do? So can we have 2-3 voices before we end? It's gone beyond our time. Thanks, Mohammed. That was nice. Yeah. Some of the others who have not talked. Ravi.
Any feedback on the session? Anything
Yeah,
that you
Ravi, Rohit. Mahendra Kumarji has been quite quiet today.
Yeah, so very good session. Thank you.
Okay.
I will listen to the recording because of traveling and all that, but very important. Yeah, very, yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you, Michael. I think it was a very nice session also because we had a little interactive group as well. Thank you for this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to add a bit. I really liked, I mean, the readings that were given for the session and also Gandhiji's trial, where one particular line, I mean, like non-cooperation with evil is as much a duty as is cooperation with good. That really struck a chord with me. And I don't know if you can take this with Minikudam or something that I was wondering about is how do we like voice out our opinions? I mean, reading all these cases and going through all the struggles like that happened, especially during the freedom struggle, and like how these people like voiced out their opinions. And why are we not able to do the same thing today, even after we have like this internet connection, everyone is connected and more people are aware of this. I don't know if they're really aware or not, but how do we raise out a voice? You know, what really changed to those days and to today, you know, in terms of freedom of expressing ourselves and avoiding self-censorship and all these things. So I just want to understand like what really changed like from that time to today. I mean, that's something I'm thinking about and I just wanted to bring it to the table.
That's very nice, Sandeep. Yeah, which is what we also would like to happen. So, but
yeah,
nice that you articulated it. Yeah. Yeah. Any last people?
Yes, actually, I joined late today, but I wanted to know some more about defamation. When a judgment is passed by High Court or Supreme Court, what are the rights of citizens to, in what way, in how far we can critically analyze that judgment? Whether that tantamounts to defamation or not, we are not clear about that.
Yeah, that will require a little more focused discussion, but we can do that, Mahendraji.
Please, please.
Okay, the last person, any one person who's not spoken. Rohit, not heard your voice sometime.
Yeah, I found like this is I received the reading material only like in last 1-2 days only, so I could not go through the reading. But I found the discussion very interesting, and I was just thinking throughout the time about various concepts that were detailed.
Okay. Thank you, Rohit.